Simona, welcome to the show.
Justin, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so it just came up on Facebook the other day that we've known each other now officially for a year. We became friends on Facebook a year ago. Well, I sent it to you. When was that? A couple days ago, right?
Yeah, it was a couple of days ago, which is
Yeah.
that's official friendship status in my opinion.
Oh, 100%. When you're friends on Facebook for a year, like we're friends for life. We're
Absolutely.
No, but
Absolutely.
you know what I love about it is we connected. I wanted to reach out to you for something completely different than why we know each other now, right? So I knew you were in the podcast production space. I own a company that partners with podcast production companies, and I was like, "Hey, let's chat about it." We ended up talking for over an hour. The first time we talked, you signed up for my immersion that I did February of last year, and now you've been in the mastermind coming up on a year come April. And it's been such a journey, right? It's been an absolute journey getting to know you, getting to know and understand your growth and your expectation of life and everything that you kind of bring to the table, which I loved. But from that standpoint, the words that come up with you are change and growth, and how those two words work parallel to one another. So let's talk a little bit about your growth and the changes that you've been through over the last year, and then we can get into how you've been able to face them, overcome them, all those things.
Sounds good. That sounds really good. And honestly, I feel like when I first started, I say doing this work, quote unquote, which like back in 2018, I was like, okay, great. I'm gonna, I'm gonna do this one thing in personal development and I'm never going to have to worry again. Everything is going to be fixed and everything is going to be perfect and everything is just me good to go. And then you start and you literally never stop. And I feel like change has been the thing that I've feared the most in my life and the thing that I've had to welcome in with the biggest open arms in my life without even having a choice and without even realizing that that's what I was doing.
Yeah. And, it's so true. And obviously, I always tell everybody that, the common question on most podcasts is like, what book do you recommend people read? And it's I always say, Who Moved My Cheese, which is a book about change, right? And how change is going to happen around you. That doesn't matter. What matters is how you react to that change. And obviously use that as a growing point, right? So obviously, as you went through change over the last year, whether it be your divorce, we'll dive right in, whether it be your divorce, whether it be shifting your business, whether it be taking a different approach to your business, all the change that you have gone through. Again, you went from being afraid of it to embracing it. What has that done for your life as far as how you've been able to find happiness a little bit, how you've been able to design your own life? What's all that good stuff?
Okay, so I feel like, again, like I said, I didn't have a choice. There was no choice in other than embracing the change. And I say choice because I feel like we always have a choice. Some people are faced with incredible situations, incredible in a good way and a bad way, and they feel like they have no choice and no decision in what they can do next. But the truth of the matter is we always have a decision. It's our choice of how we want to respond to whatever is happening to us in our lives. And I think when you stop to realize that the change that you're experiencing and that you're going through is genuinely serving your best self, even if you don't think that it is in the moment, it always is. And I'm someone who, without realizing it, was incredibly terrified of being alone. I never wanted to be alone. And then I kind of found out that by my ex-husband's new job, was going to be alone all the time. And I had a really hard time with that. And I didn't want to be by myself and I didn't want to live like, I wouldn't even like to, this is a little bit of a sore spot because I still don't really like it, but I don't like sleeping in my house by myself. I'm like terrified that someone's going to come kidnap me. I'm 32 years old. Like it can happen. It can happen.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It can happen. And so I've always been scared of that. And it's from like deep rooted things that have happened in my childhood. Don't worry, like I was never actually taken as a child, but like, you hear things and you hear stories and the stories that we hear start to shape our lives. And so I had this deep fear of abandonment, deep fear of loss, deep fear of being alone, deep fear of guilt. And something that I would say to my ex-husband all the time was, well, like, what if we get married and then you die? Or what if you get married and then you get taken away? Or like always this idea of things being taken away and me being ending up by myself. And so when I was kind of forced into this position of having to be by myself every single day for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, what I started to realize was that change actually isn't that scary. And being alone isn't actually that lonely. And there's a lot of power in how we start to show up for ourselves and the relationship we start to develop with ourselves. And so I think when we're constantly pouring into another person, another relationship, or another thing, we lose ourselves unintentionally, right? People do it as parents all the time, right? Moms, dads, people do it as business owners all the time. And, you know, the biggest gift that we can ever give ourselves is developing that relationship with ourselves. And I never noticed that I had completely forgotten who I was, how I was, and who I wanted to be in this world, because I lived my life in a way that was just in complete alignment with how do I serve everyone else but me.
Mm.
And so going through all of that change in my life has forced me to look at myself in ways that I've never been able to see myself before, and actually pick apart the things that I do actually like and pick apart the things that I don't, and get honest with myself of, why do I have this pattern? Why do I have this habit? And why did this particular thing lead to, either the I'm going to say like the breakdown of my marriage or the biggest blessing of my life.
Mm. Yeah. I love that. I love that. So you mentioned a couple of things there. You talked about fear of abandonment, which then led to constantly pouring into others, right? And that's the idea of like, I'm holding on to people by being the source that they need for whatever it is they need, right? What, like, I fill their cup, I fill their cup. And I often talk about how, you have to fill your cup up first, and what overflows is for everybody else. And I talk about that often from my own standpoint, right? Like I had abandonment issues. Like I went to therapy for it. I found out where it came from, was able to kind of heal through those traumas, to where now I'm not afraid to take care of myself first, right? Like it's a process, as we go. And it wasn't easy. It was almost like having to let go of who I was my entire life in order to embrace who I truly am, which is a scary journey for anybody. And I see you going through it still to this day, because I think we all kind of constantly go through it. Like you said, I signed up for the one self-development thing. I thought all my problems are going to be solved. Like this is a forever growth type of thing. And that's what people need to understand. So I want to talk to you a little bit about those abandonment issues. Where do you think they came from? And I know you mentioned childhood and all those things. Where do you think those abandonment issues came from?
So I know exactly where it came from because I've been doing a lot of work on myself. But ask me this a year ago and I wouldn't have been able to tell you. So this is the power of, just continuously showing up for yourself, because you actually do get answers that do change your life. So when I was growing up, my dad was a flight attendant and he was gone often. And, I have a brother and a sister, and my mom was at home with us for a couple of years, but then she went back to work. So she was, working full time, and my dad was flying, and he would do like, a week stint here and there or whatever. And when he would come back, he was so warm and he's so loving. Like that's just how he is as a person. Like he's a great man, and we have a great relationship. And it wasn't always that way, but we have a great relationship. And every time he would leave for a flight, I would sit, it was the 90s, and we had a turquoise blue couch, and I would sit on the back of that couch and I would watch him drive away in the back window, and I would cry and cry and cry and just watch him drive away. And then he would always come back, luckily for me, he would always come back. And, you know, then there was so many like little instances after that too, right? Then, like something like 9/11 happens. And when your whole family works in the flight, my whole family, they were all flight attendants, all in the industry. It was like our family business almost, Yeah. And so that happened. That was, this like fear of like things can happen that are so out of my control, and I have no control, and then things can be lost. That was like my mindset. That was like the story that was playing in my head. And there was another thing that happened too while he was away. I think I was like 19 when this happened. He was in Chile and he was on a layover, and there was a massive earthquake there. And he had to like stand in the door frame in order to like be, safe and whatever. And like, anyways, my mom had told me this story, and it was just like this constant theme of like, everything is out of my control. And every time he goes, something bad can happen. And I like made this link in my head that this is something that can happen. And it's not even all based in fact. It was more just my imaginative brain as a kid, just being like, you're here, now you're gone. You're here, and now you're gone. And like, again, I have to stress, like, he was such a loving parent. Like when he was home, he was with us cooking dinner. We were laughing, playing music. Like it was not a bad childhood. Like we had a great childhood. And still, I had all of these like abandonment issues. Then I won't go into this part too much, just out of like respect for, for my brother, but he got really sick as a kid. And then all of the attention obviously goes to that, right? The attention has to go to that. And there was what I've realized, and that this is actually a pretty recent realization, like in the last couple of weeks, that the emotional support that I needed was never given to me by the people who were supposed to be able to give it to me. And so when you have emotional abandonment paired with fear of abandonment, that innate safety that we have within ourselves is gone, right? You are on rocky grass. It's not even rocks. I don't even know what it is, but you are rocky and it's hard to stand up. But then I always had in the back of my mind this little voice in my head that goes back to when I was in high school. They used to call me dumb blonde. You're never going to be anything. You're never going to do anything. Right. And this one girl, she used to say all the time, she was just like so nasty. And she would just say all the time, like, you're so stupid and like all these things. And I was like, I'm not stupid and I'm smart and I'm going to go to school and I'm going to graduate and I'm going to have a great this, that, whatever. And you learn to become resilient, right? You learn to continuously show up for yourself, ourselves. And I think that when you're faced in life with no other choice, you're at a pivot in the road or crossroads. You're at a crossroads, let's say, and you can choose to do nothing and stay, or take a risk and show up for yourself. For me, it was always take a risk and show up for myself, because I'm the only one who's had me for my whole life. That's what it felt like, even though that's not necessarily the truth,
Yeah, for sure. And so it's so funny to hear that journey, because what I heard was I was afraid of letting go of control. Right. Like that's really what we hear more than anything. Like I wanted to control the narrative. I wanted to control everything around me. So therefore I wouldn't lose the people I cared for. I wouldn't lose the comfort that I have. I wouldn't lose these things to, hey, I'm now at a crossroads where I can sit here and maybe not be happy, but I'd be comfortable. But now I'm going to choose to be uncomfortable in order to see what's next for me. What was your biggest moment when you kind of came to a crossroads and said, this is now always going to be my choice of getting uncomfortable? Because I've seen massive growth in you, not only from a business standpoint, but from a personal standpoint. I couldn't imagine the work you did before we met, like to understand all this stuff. So I want to know more about like that first time you hit that crossroads. Okay, I've got two options here. What do I do?
100%. Okay. So in 2018, it was the summertime. And so before you and I knew each other, I was someone that I completely hated. I was a gossipy person. I was a mean person. I was always bringing people down to make myself feel better, because I couldn't place the feelings that I had. So it's like, hurt people, right? And I hated the way that I looked. I hated the way that I acted, how I showed up in life, the type of person I was, literally everything. And I remember saying he was my boyfriend at the time, then turned fiance, then turned husband, now turned ex-husband, which that's a whole thing, which we'll get into.
A lot of phases there.
But a lot happened, and it's only 2024, but that's fine. So I remember saying to him, like, I am so miserable and I'm so unhappy. And he looked at me and he's like, well, when are you going to do something about it then? He's like, enough. Like, when are you going to do something? And I was like, well, that's fucking rude. I was like, what do you mean? And so then I was like, okay, let me do something about this. So then I explored for the first time what life coaching was. But she was a life coach therapist, and she helped me, just sort out some thoughts and try and figure out, different things. And I was learning so much, and like my awareness was expanding, and I was like, oh my God, like I was learning a lot about like fear, guilt, loss, shame, guilt, like I think I said guilt twice. Anyways, but that's fine. Learning about all these different things. And I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, if I am feeling this, if I am learning this for the very first time, there has to be somebody else out there who feels the same way. And there has to be somebody else that's going to be impacted by learning this too. So I thought to myself, what's the best way that I can share what I know to somebody else who might need to hear this too? And that was through podcasting. And so I started my podcast, Happiness Happens. And I started it at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019. And the intention was, and has always been and still is, to help one person feel less alone. That has always been my mission with that show. And I think that when you have someone sitting in front of you, being a mirror for you and showing you your potential, you have the option and the power to look at that and grab that and do something epic with it. That is our choice. So I said in the beginning, we have choice. We always do. That is our choice to make something different of ourselves. So you can sit at a crossroads and you can choose to do this very scary thing, or you choose to do nothing at all. But for me, I started thinking about the kind of life that I wanted to live, the type of person I wanted to be, how I wanted to show up, and how I wanted to like make an impact, even if it wasn't on a global scale or a big scale. How do you make that impact with, the people that you love the most? And it was always a no-brainer to do the hard thing, because the hard thing will bring you the most growth, the most reward, and the most confidence in yourself.
Yeah. I love that. And I hear you talk about a lot about not feeling alone, right? Like that's what your mission is. That's what your purpose is. That's what Happiness Happens is all about. And really a lot of where you're pivoting your brand and really building that platform, because it's such an important message, right? So like, this is my strong suit. It's a quote that I'm going to mess up, and it's probably not from the person. It's probably not from the person that I'm going to say it's from. But I believe Robin Williams said something along the lines of, the scariest thing isn't being alone. The scariest thing is being surrounded by so many people and still feeling alone. And I think the way to correct that is to just make sure you're building strong relationships. And I've watched you over the last year build strong, massively strong relationships with people in the mastermind. By the way, this is not a plug for the mastermind, but the reality is, like, when you pour into something, you get out something, right? And
100%.
I've seen you pour into these people and build strong relationships with people like Brittany, and continued growth with Lisa, and everybody else in the group. And when I look at that, what are some skills or tactics you can give people to build strong relationships so they won't feel alone?
Oh, that's such a good question. And something that I've learned, and I feel like I'm continuously learning every single day, because as you said that quote, I thought to myself, yeah, like you don't want to be surrounded, like you don't want to be alone. But when I started doing all this work, I actually felt more alone than I ever have in my entire life, because you're now surrounded by people who genuinely don't understand anything that you're talking about, that you're going through, and that are, oh my gosh, I didn't know that you felt that way. Or, oh my gosh, I didn't know that, you had this thing in that you were talking about with guilt and fear. Like, I didn't know all of those things. And then the most awkward is when your family starts to realize that too. And you're like,
hey. And they think that it's their fault, right? Like they make it about them.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, hold up. This isn't about you. That's the point of this entire thing.
Exactly. And honestly, Justin, like I come from a family where, and somehow have managed to surround myself, probably because it's all lessons that I need to learn, with people, and especially family, who, I come from a big Italian family, so it makes sense, but they feel like they have the most amount of say with what you're going to do in your life, right? And it was hard for me to build myself up. I'm way better at it now, and not have to live my life by what everybody else is telling me to do. But when it comes to building those relationships, I've always been someone who's a people person. I've always really liked people. I like being around people. I like getting to know new people. And I feel like all of the things that I've done in the past and all of the experiences that I've had growing up, and I had a really traumatic high school years, like to the point where it's like, how a certain level of trauma makes you black out and like you actually don't remember things. So I spent the last like 15 years trying to remember what happened over those years, because I don't really remember them fully, but I remember some things, but not everything. Sure. And so the biggest thing that I've learned is, when you can access vulnerability within inside yourself, you're giving permission to somebody else to do the exact same thing. And the basis for me of relationships is when I can reach into my heart, and then I can reach into your heart, and I can join them together from something that we've both shared an experience in. And it doesn't have to be on a deep and soulful level. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It can just be something as simple as, hey, oh, you have a podcast. Love that for you. What's your podcast about? You know what I mean?
Love
And
that for you.
love that for you. It's my saying of my life. But there's a certain amount of like, you have to be genuine. You know what I mean? You have to be genuine with your vulnerability. And that is the basis of relationships. Without it, it's very hard to get to know people. When you have a wall up all the time, how do you expect to break down that wall? And, I think remembering that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how big you are in the industry. It doesn't matter what you do. When you approach people like with kindness, care, connection, and honesty, those are my core values. That's how I live my life. When you approach people with that, and in integrity with your own core values, you're never going to go wrong because you're literally in total alignment always. So figure out what those values are for you. That was life-changing for me, because then I started to realize if it doesn't have kindness, care, connection, I don't want it. I don't want that connection in my life. See you later.
Yeah. Dude, it's so important to understand your values, because otherwise you're going to allow people to walk all over you. You're going to surround yourself with people who don't understand you. You're going to surround yourself with people who take advantage of you. Now, one thing that I not pride you in, that's the wrong term, but one thing I really like about you is that you don't have a problem getting uncomfortable. And you're probably thinking, Justin, you're stupid. I do have a problem getting uncomfortable, but it's actually the opposite, right? Because actions always speak louder than words.
True.
You didn't know me and you said, yeah, I'm coming to or anybody who was going to my event, and you're like, I'm coming to your event, right?
I actually knew nobody. That was probably one of the craziest things I've ever done.
And you're like, I'm going to pay you this money. I have no idea who you are. I'm going to pay you this money, and I'm going to come and I'm going to stay in this house with complete strangers, and we'll see what happens. And you go from Canada to Orlando to speak at a podcast conference with 2,000 people. You do all of these things continuously, but that's where you find your tribe, right? Getting uncomfortable is where you see that. So in your life now, with that perspective, in your life, how important has been getting uncomfortable in order for you to now wind up where you are today, which is a single independent woman who's continuously growing and pushing for the life that she wants?
Honestly, you kind of stumped me on that one. There's no other choice. When there's no other choice, there's just no other option for me. Growing up, I always felt different. I always felt like the black sheep of the family, even still, like even now, you know what I mean? And when you're constantly uncomfortable to begin with, which I was, does it even matter at the end of the day? Like, honestly, does it even matter? Like, okay, so, I go and speak on a stage. Okay, I can do great or I can bomb it. Either way, you took a chance. I can come to your event. I could have totally hated it. I loved it. But you can have either or experience, and you grow and you learn from it and you're redirected from it. And so, I just always think to myself, there's no one in this world that is going to come and save you. Okay. There's no one who is going to come and pay your bills for you. There is no one who is going to come and, make sure that you are happy and safe and healthy and all of these things. These are your own responsibilities. It's your life. You have to take accountability for that. And if the way that you do that is by getting yourself uncomfortable, that is the best way to continue to grow. And I don't like the status quo. I don't subscribe to 2.5 kids and white picket fence. That's never been my dream, and it doesn't make it wrong, but it makes me want to see what else is there in life. What else can I do? You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that having a family and having kids is a bad thing by any stretch, but it's just that was not my biggest goal growing up. It was never my get married, have kids, do this, do that. That was never my thing. It was always,
what was your thing? Like when you were a kid, like what were you picturing for yourself? Because you hear all the time that women, they picture the wedding dress, the family, being a wife and a mom and so on and so forth. And I'm not saying every woman is like that. I'm sure me,
for
like
sure.
Women power, like let's go, like go run the world, because we suck at it. So like what was that vision for yourself as a child?
What's funny? I think I had so much like layered trauma on top of each other, I actually never gave myself the chance to dream. I don't remember having a big vision for myself for my life. Like I mean, I'm probably wanted to be a princess growing up. Like, let's be honest, like, didn't we all at the age of 4 or 5? Like, that's everyone's dream job, right? But even growing up, like into high school and like this and that, and whatever, I was never someone until I decided to leap from corporate into my business. I was never someone who created my own reality and created my own destiny. I very much followed what everybody else said that you should do. I pretty much almost like failed out of high school and only went to college because I had a teacher who bumped up my grade enough so that I could get in. Failed out of that program. Okay. I passed 4 out of 10 classes, came home, got accepted into a program because my mom told me it would be a good idea. So I did that for 4 years. Then I started working in corporate marketing, PR, and this and that, all these different things. And then I kind of woke up and I was like, what is my life? I was like, what is this? Like, how did I get here? And then started to take those steps. So I think maybe it's a culmination of like having an entire life that I never actually even decided was mine to now deciding that this is my time to figure out what I want for me. And it really sucks hurting people along the way. That's been hard for me. Like it's very hard. And like, still I wrestle with like a lot of guilt for choosing myself in my divorce. That was the crux of it. Nothing bad happened. It was just choosing a different life. And it's just, sometimes you're just given options in life and there's no other way but to just take the leap and take the step forward. It's meant for you.
Yeah. And it's true. I think a lot of times as we figure out who we are as people, you do hurt people along the way, right? Like intentionally, not intentionally, whatever the case may be. But especially when I hear your journey and understanding that a lot of what happened in your life was just like, okay, yeah, sure. That's right. That's my next step. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll do that. Going from being that person to being the person of like, no, this is what I want. Right. And I think the reality is when you get to become that person of this is what I want. And mine happened. Thank goodness I was engaged before. Like if I had married that person, I would have hurt them and left them in the dust. Cause then I found myself and like, what do I want? But the reality is like, you have to get to that point. Some people get there at 20, some people get there at 15, some people get there at 60. But at some point you get there, and then that's when you take back your power to the point where when you're on your deathbed, you don't have any regrets. So I want to ask you this question. You talk a lot about happiness. What is your definition of happiness?
Inner peace. Happiness for me is a total and complete inner peace. And what I love about my definition of happiness is that it is so individual to every single person that may think of it in that way. Like inner peace for you looks different than inner peace for me. And ultimately, what you're getting to is the state of alignment. Because if everything in your life is offering you inner peace, you get to this state of alignment. Every action that you do, every reaction that you have is in total alignment with who you are. And so happiness is not about being happy every single day. It's not about faking positivity. Happiness for me is working through the shitty parts and is like the ugly cry and the breakdown before you get built back up again. That is happiness for me. That is all happiness for me, because that's the journey to coming back home to yourself. And when you come back home to yourself, that is where your state of inner peace lies.
Yeah, I love it. So obviously you're producing content constantly between your 2 podcasts. You're helping your clients on the podcast side build out their shows and build their brand and do all that stuff with the podcast production company, which we didn't even get into. That's a whole nother episode. We can dive in, which I love.
Did you just invite me back for part 2?
About once a year, I bring podcast people on to this show and we talk about podcasting because it's the vehicle that changed my life.
Love that.
And I thought potentially we were going to go there, but we didn't, which is great because I've loved this conversation so far. But I want to ask you a question that I ask a lot of people, not everybody, but I ask a lot of people. At the end of your life, all this content that you've created has disappeared. There's none of that exists anymore. There's no more legacy built beyond whatever. But you can be remembered for one sentence. What would that sentence be?
She was kind and empowering to everyone she met.
I love that. I love that. That's a powerful statement.
Woo, I give myself some chills over here.
Yeah, it's a powerful statement, and I see you living that. Now, again, I didn't know you before, right? I didn't know the old Simona. I didn't know the yes, whatever Simona. I only know the Simona now, and I can see you living in that power, and I love that. And I can't wait to see the evolution and see what's next and continue to see all that stuff. So let me ask you another question that I ask every single person on the show. It's a 2-part question. The first question is, what is your definition of success? The second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Okay. My definition of success is the freedom to choose the life that you want. That is my definition of success. And the 3 things that I do every single day is something for my mind. I guess something for my mind and soul. I'll put those together. Something for my body, and then something for my business or passion or like in those 3 buckets. So whether that's, going for a walk in the middle of the day, whether that's playing with my dog, whether that's, building something out or taking something off my to-do list that I know needs to get done so I can keep moving the needle forward. As long as I'm doing those 3 things every single day, that's always adding to my success, because at the end of the day, I'm choosing myself, and I'm choosing myself in a way that aligns back to the life that I really want to be living every single day.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's actually a really, really good answer. I've probably asked that question almost 400 times. So that's a really, really good answer.
Thank you.
And it's so true, right? Understanding that maybe we don't do the same thing every single day, but what are we pouring into? And I think that's a different way to kind of look into what we're doing. So let's talk really quick. I know I said we weren't going to do it, but let's talk really quick about podcasting. What made you choose this medium? Because people ask me that all the time. Like, why did you choose podcasting? Because I started podcasting when people were like, what the frick is a podcast, right? I just sounded like John Beebe. What the frick is a podcast?
I love him.
He's currently in Disney World doing Disney in a day, which is, fly down, do Disney, fly back. But
did you see his flight was $17? Just take that in.
Yeah, it's wild. 17 each way. So his round
It'd
trip,
be like 1,700 from Toronto. Just saying.
That is true, man. But Spirit will get you there for cheap. Hopefully they get you. The wing might fall off. But people ask me that all the time, and I don't really have an answer, because there was like, other than like, I think I could do this. Like, that was really the thought process. So why did you choose podcasting? Because, you said, what, 2018 you started?
End of 2018, beginning of 2019. Yeah.
So it was much more prominent then. Like, there was a massive growth. So like, what made you choose it as your medium?
I don't think I actually chose it. I think it chose me. And the reason why is, I'm not a very good reader. Like, it's very hard for me to like sit and read. I'm also not really I'm a good writer. Like, when I put my mind to it, I can write. Okay. But like, I wanted what I was learning to be accessible to other people too. And honestly, if you go back to like the whole almost first year, and I'm going into year 4 of my podcast now, I guess more than that. Hold on. Anyways, whatever year it is, 2024, whatever year it is, doesn't matter.
You're going into year 5.
Going into year 5. Oh my God. That's crazy. But the whole first year, the podcast is literally like a personal journal to myself. You know what I mean? And I think I just chose it because I like to talk. If you can't tell through this episode, like, I love to talk. And I think podcasting chose me for having a podcast, but then also for producing them, because I have such a passion for helping people bring their message to the mic. Like, I love when people step up and believe in themselves and share that thing that makes them feel uncomfortable and grow a little bit every single time. It's a growth tool. Podcasting is growth, and I love growth. So
no, I love it. And I love that you help other people do the same. And before I get to the last question that I ask everybody, how can people,
oh my God, that wasn't the last question. No, I'm just kidding.
how do people get a hold of you? How do they start working with you? How do they look into some of the services? I know you're doing trainings and stuff like that. What's all the good stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm in the process right now at this current moment when we're recording this of rebranding my entire business. The new brand is called Volt Productions, VOLT. So it'll be voltproductions.co. That's our website.
Oh, by the way, I was waiting for you to change that, because that was back in, when were we in Chicago? June? We came up with the name. I was like, when's she changing this thing?
when I had to unbury myself from the devastation of ending my marriage, Justin, but that's fine.
I was like, just do it. Just pull the trigger. You know me, like, just do it. You're
Just do
overcomplicating
it.
this. Just do it.
Just do it. You're making this way more complicated than it needs to be. So yeah, voltproductions.co. And then on Instagram, I'm at Simona with 2_ Constantini. Same handle on TikTok as well. And I'm also on LinkedIn if you're on there too. But if you go to my website, you can find all of the different things. Check out our services, and we have all kinds of digital products and free products to help you with your podcasting journey. And if you ever want to chat happiness, just send me a message, because I would love to.
I love it. I love it. Like I said, Simona, we wrap up every single episode with the same question. Since the show is called The Growth Now Movement, that question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
My biggest moment of growth. Ooh. My biggest moment of growth, I might actually get teary-eyed for a second. Hold on. My biggest moment of growth was when my ex-husband moved out of my house. And for the first time, I really had to do everything alone. And I have done it, and I continue to do it every day. And I've never been so proud of myself than I have in the last few months. And yeah, I think it was the day that he moved out. I happened to do a sled push for this challenge that I was doing that same weekend. And it was the 24-hour sled push, where you push the sled for 24 hours. And I couldn't think of anything more, what's the word I'm looking for? I couldn't think of anything more like powerful and that related more to the situation that I was going through than that. And then I came home to my house. It was emptied, and knowing that it was my time to step into who I am and be able to do that for myself has been my biggest moment of growth in my life.
I love it. Simona, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey with my audience. I think they're absolutely going to love it. So thank you so much for just being you and being vulnerable and always crying. And
I'm always crying. I'm okay, I promise.
So just a heads up to listeners, she cries on 75% of our mastermind calls.
It's a good way to process emotions, okay?
It's a great way to process emotions. I honestly wish I cried more. It's just never like, don't get me wrong, I do cry from time to time, but it's a rarity. Like, my wife has probably seen me cry 3 times.
Wow. 3?
Yeah.
That's upping it, because the last time you told me it was only once or twice. So that means you've cried one more time.
I think I'm making one up. It might be twice, but it could be 3 times. But it's just not.
I have to ask Lauren.
But you do feel better afterwards. So like, but more importantly, right? I think when you're crying, there's vulnerability behind it, and I think that's a superpower that you have, that needs to be recognized, is your vulnerability and your ability to allow other people to be who they are. I think that's a huge superpower. And so kudos to you for being that person. Thank you for coming on the show. And thank you so much for being a part of my life. This has been great.
Thank you so much for having me. And I am so blessed to have you in my life.